Good evening, and welcome back to Eerie Echoes. Tonight, we're diving into the old spine of North America, the Appalachians, where every hollow carries a memory, every ridgeline hides a ledger, and every trail thinks it knows you better than you know yourself. What follows are 8 first-person accounts gathered from hikers, locals, rescuers, and researchers. Some of these should be impossible. All of them are true as they were told. We begin with a valley that shouldn't exist. My name is Daniel Carter, and if you only hear one thing I say, let it be this. If your GPS shows a gray void in the middle of a national forest, don't go looking for it. Gray means more than no data. Sometimes it means keep out. This happened 2 Octobers ago in the Great Smoky Mountains, on the North Carolina side. I've been backpacking for 12 years. I know the drill. File your itinerary, pack your layers, carry a paper topo, even if you've got 3 devices and a solar bank. I'm not a thrill seeker. I go to breathe. 3 of us planned a 3-day loop on an old CCC logging grade. Me, Rachel, who can name every hardwood by bark alone, and Tyler, a paramedic who thinks bear spray cures most problems. We've done the route twice. It's honest mountain miles. A steady climb, a long contour along a ridge, then a lazy drop to water and a campsite that smells like balsam and wet stone. Day 1 was textbook. We signed the register, shouldered in under a sky so clean it hurt, and made camp at a flat bench above a creek. I slept like I always sleep in the backcountry, warm, tired, happy. Nothing weird. Day 2 was when the forest changed. We woke to silence. Not quiet, I mean blank. No warbler chatter, no invisible chipmunks making fun of us, no damp leaf hiss. When I zipped the tent, the sound was loud in a way it shouldn't be. The air had that dry metal taste you get right before lightning, only the sky was a blue postcard. Rachel frowned at the blazes. These look new. The white rectangles on the tulip poplars were crisp, like someone had repainted them in the night with a ruler and a level. Tyler said we were overthinking it and should enjoy the free maintenance. Around 11, we hit the fork that broke the map. There should have been only one tread bending west to the ridge. Instead, there was a second cut angling downslope, narrow, immaculate, with blazes the exact same white but thinner, like a careful imitation. On my phone, the official trail lit up with all the usual layers. The other line registered as no terrain, a smooth gray thumbprint smudged over the topo. Rachel's Garmin showed our elevation dropping 500 feet we hadn't lost yet. Tyler's old Sunto compass spun a lazy circle and shrugged. We should have turned around. We went down. The tread was too perfect. No blowdowns, no weeping roots, no spider silk across the face that tells you you're first that morning. The light got anemic. That's the only word for it. The green bled out of leaves until the whole slope was a study in paper whites and graphite grays. Bark paled. Ferns looked like ghosts of ferns. When I took out my phone to film the weirdness, the screen recorded everything normal. October color, healthy canopy, like it refused to see what my eyes did. Rachel touched a beech leaf and hissed. Her fingers came away dusted like she'd handled ash. We dropped into the hollow and the temperature fell as if we'd opened a walk-in fridge. The creek that should have sung bright through the center was a trickle, glass clear and silent, like it couldn't be bothered to sound like water. The floor of the valley was tidy, not landscaped, just corrected. Fallen limbs lay in concentric patterns like ripples. Gravel gathered into braids that didn't match flow. I felt it in my back teeth. Order where there shouldn't be. We set our packs down. We didn't say the word spooked, but we didn't have to. Tyler tried for normal. Lunch, he said, and tore open tortillas like he was on a break at the firehouse. That's when I noticed the footprints, not ours. These were bare. Dozens of prints in the powder-pale silt along the creek. Small, large, narrow, wide, pressed so clean you could see toe whorls. They made a loose ring that never crossed itself, circling just wider than where we stood. Past the silt line, the ground was undisturbed. No entry, no exit. As if something had walked out of nothing, looped us, then walked back into nothing. "Kids playing," Tyler said, but his voice didn't have a place to land. Rachel crouched. "No heel strike," she whispered. "Just placement." She's the tracker between us. She said it like a doctor finding something in a scan she hoped she wouldn't. I said we should go. Tyler said give him 10 minutes to scout for a flat spot big enough to pitch if we had to. We watched him step past the ring of prints. He grinned back at us. "Relax," and his shadow went the wrong direction. I saw it. The sun was overhead. His shadow stretched uphill, thin and long, like it was trying to pull him back to us and couldn't. He didn't go far. Maybe 40 yards to a pale stand of ash trees. He turned to wave. His face did an odd flicker, and then he was just in a slightly different place than his body, like a badly synced video call. We both laughed because the other choice was to panic. "Stop messing around," Rachel said. "I'm not," Tyler said. Only his mouth didn't move when we heard it. The wind arrived all at once, not a breeze, not a gust. Wind with shape to it. It came down the hollow, rounded our circle of bare prints, and carried whispering with it. Full sentences at the edge of comprehension, like your name in a crowded room. "Stay, stay, stay." Rachel grabbed my arm. "We need to leave, now." We called to Tyler. He nodded, slung his pack, took one step, and his foot landed 6 inches to the left of where it should have. He swore, tried again, and fixed his eyes on our faces like a person learning to walk. We stepped toward him, and with each step the distance did not change. It's hard to explain without sounding drunk. He was 40 yards away. We took 10 yards forward. He remained 40 yards away. The math didn't care about us. The whispers rose. "Belong, belong." That did it. We ran. We didn't talk strategy. We didn't consult maps. We did the animal thing, up and out, following any slope that promised edge. The perfect tread under our boots shifted subtly, turning into curves that led back toward the creek, no matter which line we chose. It was a maze with rules we couldn't see. Once I swear we crossed our own boot prints going the opposite direction. Fresh, crisp, ours, and not ours. "Pick a bearing," I panted. "Any bearing, don't deviate." We set our compasses to magnetic east and bullheaded the contour. The gray thinned. A single yellow leaf showed itself like a flag. We pushed harder, and the wind rose behind us like a crowd. Just past a fallen log white as bone, the forest blinked. That's the word. It blinked. One frame of film gone. We were suddenly standing at a junction we recognized. The honest, scuffed ridge trail with paint-chipped blazes and trampled duff. We turned as one. The path we had descended wasn't there. Not overgrown, not hidden. Gone. An unbroken slope of sane October hardwoods and a creek that sounded like a creek. We waited for Tyler. We waited a long time. We did everything the book says. We marked last known point, blew 3 on the whistle, mirrored with the signal mirror though the light was wrong, hung bright tape. At dusk, we made a bivvy on the ridge so we'd have eyes at first light. I didn't sleep. Rachel did the thing where you pretend to sleep so your brain doesn't break. At 4 a.m., the voices returned, soft as a breath through the leaves. We both heard them, Tyler's among them. Not a cry for help, the opposite. A lullaby, almost. "It's fine. I'm fine. You can go now. You can go." His voice threaded through others, men, women, a child, and under all of it a hum like electricity through a substation fence. At dawn, we made for the trailhead at a dead march and raised SAR. I gave coordinates I didn't believe. The team took us seriously. A chopper went up. Dogs came out. We told the truth and got the looks you'd expect. But the handler didn't roll his eyes. "Tracks are tracks," he said, and put the shepherd on a lead. The dog pulled straight to the shoulder where our prints met the pale silt and stopped, sat, whined. Nothing on the far side. No scent, no refusal either. It was like the world ended there for his nose. The handler tried twice more. Same sit. Same soft sound a working dog makes when the thing it's been trained to find isn't findable. By afternoon, we were doing spirals. By evening, the incident commander put a gentle hand on my shoulder and said the sentence that means the worst thing. We're moving into limited operations. I signed the paper. It felt like signing to donate an organ. 2 days later, they found nothing. Not a dropped bar, not a torn strap, not a sock. We cried the way adults cry, pressed against trees so we wouldn't bother the birds. 3 weeks later, I woke at home with damp earth under my fingernails and a smell in my bedroom like cold stone and eucalyptus. For a second, I was certain I'd brought the hollow home with me, that I'd rolled in its dust. The rational part of me said I'd been potting a plant on the porch the day before. The other part whispered belong. I don't hike alone anymore. I don't hike near gray patches on my maps, and I don't ignore silence. Real forest has a heartbeat. When it stops, go. One more thing. 2 months after the search, I took Rachel to a diner off 441 because they do pancakes the size of hubcaps, and we needed a place where the biggest decision is butter or syrup. Our waitress was early 20s, hair in a messy knot, nose ring catching the light. She looked familiar in a way I couldn't place until she set down coffee and said, "Y'all from out of town?" in a voice that was almost a chord, like 2 notes at once. Rachel asked if we knew each other. The waitress smiled the way you smile when you're sharing a joke with yourself. "You're fine," she said, and her eyes were the washed-out gray of creek silt. "You can go now." She touched my shoulder as lightly as static, and for a blink the sound in the diner dropped away. The clink, the orders, the sizzle, until it was just her and a wind that didn't move air. We left a tip and didn't finish our food. When we turned back from the parking lot, our waitress was gone, like she hadn't been there at all. If you are a map person, take this as a map story. If you are a prayer person, take it as a prayer. Either way, mark the places that refuse to be marked. They are not empty. They are full of belong. Some places try to keep you. Others call you by name. And sometimes, miles of rock keep time with a bell no clock can hear, because in coal country, shift never truly ends. Please don't forget to subscribe. Up next, a miner's bell that still rings under a sealed heading and a count that won't stop at the number it should. Please SC. My name is Harold Lawson, though in coal country most folks just called me Red on account of my hair. I spent 20 years underground in the West Virginia seams until my back gave out and the dust in my lungs made every winter feel like I was drowning. I swore I'd never set foot in a mine again. But Appalachia doesn't always honor oaths. And last fall I learned that some shifts never end, even when the mine is sealed and the men are long dead. I was 52 when the call came. My cousin Earl was still active in the Union, one of the last who remembered the Miller Hollow Mine disaster of 1963. 31 men killed in a roof collapse, entombed under slate so thick the company decided it was cheaper to seal the heading than recover the bodies. Families held vigils for years. My mother swore she could still hear her brother S' voice carried up the ventilation shafts at night. The mine closed for good in the 70s, but last October, Earl said a crew of kids had been trespassing on the old property. One of them came back babbling about bells ringing in the dark, not the clang of steel on rock, but a steady toll, like a church service underground. The sheriff brushed it off as mountain kids spooking each other. Earl didn't. He asked me to go with him, to check the sealed portal and see if anyone had broken through. I wanted to say no. But my daddy and uncles are buried in that mountain with the rest. If there was even a chance the place had been disturbed, I had to see it myself. We hiked in at dusk, flashlights cutting through mist that always seems thicker in hollows where tragedy pooled. The portal gate was still in place, rusted steel bars welded across the drift mouth, padlock fused shut with age. Nobody had broken through. The earth itself seemed to breathe cold air from the gaps, smelling of stone dust and something sour sweet like old wood left in rain. "That sound you hearin'?" Earl whispered. At first I thought it was my own pulse. A slow, hollow dong. 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 Regular as a shift bell calling men to work. But it wasn't echoing from inside my skull. It was seeping from the dark throat of the drift. "That's impossible," I muttered. Bell lines were cut when they sealed it. The bell system back then was mechanical, steel wire running from the foreman's station to the headings. Pull once for coal car, twice for man trip, 3 for danger. I hadn't heard one since the 90s, but this was different. Too deep, too heavy. Like stone itself was tolling. We stood there in silence, the sound vibrating through our boots. I swear I felt it in my teeth. Then something worse. Voices. Not loud, not clear, just the rhythm of men working. Picks striking, shovels scraping, low calls like "timber here" and "hold that beam." Work site noise. The kind you can't mistake if you've ever spent your life underground. Earl made the sign of the cross. "Red, those men been dead 60 years. We should have turned back. Instead, we circled the portal, found the old ventilation shaft up the slope. The grating had collapsed decades ago. A black hole yawned where cold air sighed out in steady pulses. Earl lowered his lantern. "Smell that? Fresh smoke." He wasn't wrong. Under the stone dust was the acrid tang of burning powder, the smell of black damp after a shot. It rolled up warm against the autumn chill. I said we ought to mark it for the authorities, let the state deal with whatever kids had crawled inside. But then the bell tolled 3 times in quick succession, the danger signal. And over it came the unmistakable panic of men shouting, rocks breaking, the groan of a beam snapping. It was the sound of the disaster itself, replaying 60 years late. Earl swore under his breath, tied rope to an oak, and dropped his boot over the lip. I grabbed his shoulder. "We ain't rescuers no more." He looked at me with wet eyes. "My daddy's in there, yours too." And just like that, I followed him. The shaft was tight, timbered rough, air cool on my cheeks. After 30 feet, it opened to a side chamber that hadn't seen light in half a century. My beam caught initials carved in the wood. JL 1959, my uncle's mark. My throat closed. We weren't supposed to be able to go further. The collapse should have sealed the headings completely. But the tunnel sloped on, timbers warped but passable. And with each step, the sounds grew sharper. Picks ringing, boots crunching in rhythm. A man humming the old coal hymn, dark as a dungeon. Our lights flickered, dimmed, then brightened like someone was playing with the current. But there was no current, only stone and dust and them. At the first intersection, we froze. Ahead, in the crosscut, lanterns bobbed. Not electric caps, lanterns, glass and flame, swinging from hands we couldn't see. "Shift's on," a voice rasped, deep, rough, Tired. My father's voice. I nearly ran to it, but Earl held me back. "Look at their shadows," he whispered. The lantern glow threw long figures on the wall, dozens of men stooped under invisible roofs, swinging invisible picks. But where their bodies should have been, there was nothing. Just the shadows working without owners. The bell tolled again, and the shadows all turned as one. Faces I hadn't seen since I was 12 surfaced in the glow. Hollow-eyed, coal-dusted, mouths moving with words carried on no breath. Timber, powder, car coming down. Ordinary words, but they made the walls tremble. I saw my father among them, clear as day, his beard coal black, his eyes the same gray-blue I saw in the mirror every morning. He raised a hand in greeting, and my legs gave way. "Dad," I croaked. Earl grabbed me, hissed in my ear, "They ain't them, not no more." We backed toward the shaft. The shadows didn't follow, but the sound did. Picks and bells and timber cracking. Louder now, angrier, like the mountain resented our witness. Dust sifted from the roof. Somewhere deeper, stone screamed under weight. By the time we scrambled into night air, the shaft was exhaling heat hot enough to sting. The bell clanged once, twice, 3 times, so hard the oak we'd tied off to vibrated. And then silence. We reported it. The sheriff shook his head, said old miners hear ghosts where kids just hear wind. But when he sent a deputy to check the site, the man quit the force 2 days later without explanation. Earl doesn't talk about it anymore. I can't stop. Because last week, at 2:13 in the morning, the exact shift change bell from Miller Hollow, I woke to hear it inside my house. One toll, then another, then 31 in total. And over the silence after, a single word rasped in my father's coal dust voice, "Timber." I live alone. But sometimes deep in the night, my floorboards creak like timbers bowing under pressure. And I swear the air tastes of dust. I've stopped sleeping in the dark because I know the mountain isn't finished ringing its bell. And when it calls again, I don't think it's just for the dead. Some tunnels collapse on men. Others collapse on time itself, trapping whole shifts in a loop that refuses to end. But above ground, in quiet Appalachian hollows, there are other prisons, cabins where couples check in for the weekend and never leave, except as photographs nailed to basement walls. Not every trap in the Appalachians hides in the deep woods or beneath the ground. Some wear timber walls and warm fireplaces, luring couples inside with promises of peace. My name is Emily Richardson, and I need to warn you. Not every cabin in the Smoky Mountains is meant to be rented. Some are meant to keep you. For our 5th anniversary, my husband Jake and I booked what seemed like the deal of a lifetime. A cabin called Whispering Pines Retreat. The listing showed breathtaking photos, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking misty ridges, a stone fireplace, even a hot tub on the deck. And the price was suspiciously low, barely half of other rentals in the area. There were no reviews, just an email address. But we convinced ourselves it was a new listing and rushed to book it. The confirmation email was strange. A single line. "Thank you for choosing Whispering Pines. Enjoy your stay." No check-in code, no phone number, nothing. The GPS led us far into the mountains, past tourist towns and onto narrow gravel switchbacks. The last 20 miles, we saw no houses, no cars, not even power lines. Then we reached it, a clearing golden with sunset. And there stood the cabin, exactly like the photos, but with smoke already curling from the chimney, warm light glowing through the windows. "Creepy, but maybe they just sent someone to prepare it," Jake said. But when we stepped inside, there was no one. Just a note on the counter in elegant handwriting. "Welcome to Whispering Pines. Everything you need has been provided." And indeed it had. The fridge was stocked with food we hadn't requested. The closets were filled with clothes in our exact sizes. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I looked out the massive windows and saw lights in the forest. Dozens of pale orbs drifting slowly between the trees, circling the cabin. They weren't flashlights, they weren't lanterns. They looked like candles carried by invisible hands. By the time I shook Jake awake, they were gone. The next morning, a guest book appeared on the coffee table. Heavy leather, filled with decades of entries. Early notes praised the peace and romance, but the later ones turned desperate. Strange dreams, feel watched. Car won't start, trails keep looping back. Don't stay past checkout. Don't let it keep you. The most recent entry was just 2 weeks earlier. It ended mid-sentence. When I told Jake we had to leave, his voice was distant. Why leave? We only just arrived. I searched for the car keys, ended up in the basement, and froze. A wall covered in photographs. Couples through the decades, all smiling in front of the same cabin. Some in black and white, some Polaroids, some recent. And at the bottom, a glossy print of me and Jake, smiling on the deck, wearing clothes we didn't own. Scrawled beneath in that same elegant hand, the Richardsons, October 2024. They decided to stay forever. When I showed Jake, he just stared at the fire, murmuring, I feel like I'm disappearing. That night, the voices came. Dozens of them, calling our names outside, inviting us to dinner, promising forever. Jake stood at the door, hand on the knob, ready to walk out. His eyes were vacant. Desperate, I tore the guest book pages with our names and threw them into the fire. The cabin shook, windows cracked. The chorus outside turned to screams. But the car started. Somehow, whatever bound us had loosened. We fled down the mountain, not looking back. When we got home, the listing had vanished. The charge was gone from our card, as if Whispering Pines had never existed. But sometimes, on quiet nights, Jake and I both hear it. A whisper at the window. The Richardsons. You've already checked in. Why not come home? Not every cage has bars. Some lock you inside with warmth and comfort. But if cabins can keep you, what about the forests themselves? Some say deep in the Smokies lies a preserve where the mountains collect not only creatures, but people. Before we continue, if you are still with us on this journey into the Appalachian dark, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Eerie Echoes. It helps us keep bringing you stories the mountains don't want told. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I used to be a wildlife biologist. Used to be. Because after what I discovered in the Smoky Mountains 3 months ago, I'll never set foot in the wilderness again. For 8 years, I studied Appalachian wildlife, focusing on large mammals, black bears, elk, mountain lions, wolves that officially don't exist here. I was good at my work, careful, methodical, and when a grant came through to study what might be a new subspecies of black bear, I was thrilled. The research zone was remote, 15,000 acres of untouched Smoky Mountain wilderness. I was dropped in with 2 months of supplies, a sat phone, and dozens of trail cameras. I'd worked alone before, and I loved the solitude. Or thought I did. The first week was normal. My cameras caught deer, boar, healthy bear populations. But in the second week, the tracks started. Enormous paw prints in the mud, twice the size of a grizzly's. Wolf prints belonging to animals that must have weighed 200 pounds. Bird tracks suggesting wingspans larger than any known eagle. When I checked the camera footage, it was worse. Bears walking upright, perfectly balanced, like people. Deer moving in synchronized formation, turning at once like soldiers on parade. And more disturbing still, animals watching the cameras. A black bear stared directly into the lens, adjusted its position to remain in frame, then moved on, like it knew it was being studied. By week 3, my sat phone stopped connecting. It showed full signal, but no one answered. My GPS began showing coordinates that placed me in impossible locations, sometimes in the middle of a lake, other times miles underground. That's when I found the valley. I was following a game trail uphill when the trees opened into a basin that shouldn't exist. Perfectly circular, ringed by mountains too steep for this region. And in the center, sprawled across the valley floor, was what looked like a wildlife preserve mixed with a laboratory. There were enclosures, hundreds of them, and inside weren't just animals. There were people. At first I thought they were other researchers, maybe rangers, but then I recognized some of their faces. Missing persons, hikers whose names I'd seen on reports, hunters who'd vanished. They moved in rigid formation around the enclosures, their steps synchronized like the deer and wolves on my footage. Some still looked human, others didn't. Their eyes reflected light like animals, and their movements were too smooth, too deliberate. Watching over it all were figures in ranger uniforms, but wrong. Their limbs bent slightly off. Their faces looked like masks. When one of them turned and waved at me, its fingers folded in ways no hand should move. "Dr. Chen," it called across the valley, voice carrying too perfectly. "Thank you for accepting our invitation." That's when it hit me. The grant, the funding, the coordinates. They hadn't been for studying wildlife. They'd been bait. I was the specimen. I bolted, crashed through the trees, following instinct, ignoring my equipment. Behind me, I could hear steady footsteps, never rushing, just keeping pace, like they knew I couldn't outrun them. My GPS screamed contradictory coordinates. My compass spun uselessly. But one rule of tracking stuck in my mind. Animals follow water, so I followed the sound of a stream. Hours later, I stumbled onto a trail with familiar Park Service blazes. My knees were bleeding, my gear gone, but I was alive. At the ranger station, I tried to report everything: the valley, the enclosures, the imposters. But my grant didn't exist. The university had no record of my funding. The sat phone, never issued. Even the helicopter drop wasn't logged. According to the official story, I'd never been in that section of the Smokies at all. Now I teach high school biology in a landlocked state. Safer, quieter. But I know the preserve is still there. I see its fingerprints in nature documentaries, in photographs of wildlife that looks too staged. Because the truth is this: the Appalachians aren't just hiding monsters. They're curating a collection. And sometimes, the rarest specimens are not animals. They're people like me, researchers, observers, those who know how to watch. We think we're studying the wild, but sometimes the wild is studying us. If that story unsettled you, remember, these are the Appalachians. The mountains don't forget their guests, and our next account proves it. Because while Dr. Chen escaped the preserve, some couples never leave their mountain retreats at all. The mountains don't just collect hikers, sometimes they collect entire families, and leave a scene so tidy it convinces everyone to stop looking. My name is Lisa Hartwell, and I spent 8 years on search and rescue along the Carolina-Tennessee line. I know what a real campsite looks like, and I know when something is staged. The Morrison case began late September. David and Karen, mid-50s, experienced, responsible, failed to return from a 3-day loop in the Pisgah. Perfect weather, perfect itinerary. Odds should have been good. We launched 12 volunteers, 2 K9 teams, and a helo. For 8 miles, the trail told a normal story. Prints matched, a wrapper tucked into a log, even a dropped camera. Then, at mile 12, the prints ended mid-stride. Not onto rock, not into brush, just gone. The dog stalled, whining at an invisible wall. Handlers tried again. Same sit, same soft refusal. That told me more than any map. When we found their campsite, everything was textbook. Tent pitched crisp, cook kit spotless, boots lined neatly. Too neat. No crumbs, no scuffs, no wear. Catalog camping, not lived-in camping. The dogs refused the perimeter, tails low. That night I woke to voices from the site. Karen, clear as glass. Lisa, help us. Then David. We're fine. Don't come. Too calm, too scripted. Tom, our lead, heard only owls. The next morning I followed the voices. The terrain bent wrong, ridges out of place, lichen I'd never seen. Cameras appeared, small, metal, mounted on trees, then stone, then sprouting from the ground. Their LEDs pulsed like breath, and then a valley that shouldn't exist. In the center, a realistic campsite. 2 Morrisons in jackets, ID tags pinned neat. Relief hit me until I noticed seams at their wrists, eyes replaced with tiny camera lenses. In Karen's voice, one said, "The search is over. We've decided to continue our hike." In David's, "Tell our daughter we're safe." My radio hissed, "They are being studied. Their decision-making is valuable. You may join them for comparative data." I ran. Trails folded, blazes reoriented to lead me back, but I cut for water downhill until reality snapped back into place. When I reached base camp, Tom was packing. "Good news," he said. "They were located, elected to continue." He showed me a photo, 2 hikers waving from a ridge, 2 saturated, faces hidden. My own camera showed nothing but empty woods. I resigned the next week. You can keep searching when the people you were meant to find are being held outside the map. Now I track bulletins, patterns. 2 perfect campsites, logbooks written in handwriting that doesn't match, dogs that sit down at nothing. Last week at 2:17 a.m., a blocked call left a message on my phone, just the soft click of a lens cap, and a woman's voice I recognized as not quite human. "Lisa, comparative data remains valuable. If you ever find a campsite that looks too perfect, don't relax. If your dog refuses to cross a line, trust the dog. And if a voice tells you to stop looking, understand. The search isn't over. It's been redirected." Before we continue, if you're enjoying these Appalachian accounts, consider liking the video and subscribing to Eerie Echoes. It helps us keep sharing the stories the mountains don't want remembered. My name is Dr. Michael Chen. For 8 years, I worked as a wildlife biologist, studying large mammals in the southern Appalachians. Black bears, elk, the occasional cougar that officially doesn't exist here. I trusted data, GPS collars, trail cameras, plaster casts. Science gave me order, until 3 months ago, when I found a place the maps refused to show. The project was supposed to be simple, a grant-funded study of a rumored black bear subspecies in the Great Smoky Mountains. The research area covered roughly 15,000 acres of wilderness, reachable only by helicopter or a 2-day hike. I was dropped in with 2 months of supplies, a satellite phone, and enough trail cameras to build a grid across the entire valley. The first week was textbook. Deer on their corridors, boar rooting swamps, black bears following streams at night. But in the second week, the tracks appeared. They looked like bear prints until I measured them. The stride length suggested something over 8 feet tall, the claws gouged into rock, too deep, too long. I cast the prints in plaster, then cross-checked against databases. Nothing matched. The closest comparison? Cave bear. Extinct for 20,000 years. 2 days later, I found feline tracks wider than my palm, wolf tracks heavier than anything documented in North America, and avian talons long enough to scratch through stone. The footage was worse. My trail cameras recorded bears walking only on their hind legs, posture flawless. Deer moving in formation like soldiers, pivoting in unison. Birds flying in geometric spirals, choreographed rather than wild. And then there were the animals that studied the cameras. A black bear approached one of my units, tilted its head, then adjusted position so the motion sensor would trigger while its body remained framed perfectly. Wildlife doesn't pose. This did. By week 3, the technology broke. My satellite phone showed full bars but no connection. GPS coordinates contradicted each other, sometimes placing me miles underground. Compass needles spun. That's when I followed a game trail over a ridge and saw it. A valley that shouldn't exist, too circular, too flat, ringed by mountains rising like walls. And in the center lay something between a wildlife preserve and a laboratory. Enclosures stretched across the floor. Inside them were animals I couldn't classify. Some looked like evolutionary throwbacks, massive shaggy beasts with claws like scythes. Others were hybrids that hurt my eyes to study. Scaled mammals, feathered predators, forms stitched together from species that shouldn't overlap. And then I saw the people. At first I thought they were staff, but I recognized faces from missing person reports, hikers, hunters, a park ranger whose poster I'd seen pinned at a station. They moved with the same eerie precision as the animals, walking patterns too exact to be natural. Their eyes reflected like glass. Watching over them were figures in ranger uniforms, but their proportions were wrong. Arms a little too long, movements too smooth. Their faces looked like masks. One turned toward me. Its eyes flashed like an animal's, and it spoke, voice carrying up the ridge as if distance didn't exist. "Dr. Chen, thank you for accepting our invitation. Your methodology has been very helpful." My mouth went dry. "What is this?" "A collection," it said. "You study animals. We study you." It began walking uphill, faster than a human should, joints bending just slightly off. More figures emerged from the shadows of the valley. They had been waiting. I bolted. The forest twisted against me. Trails bent back on themselves. Blazes changed direction. My GPS flickered with impossible coordinates. Behind me, their footsteps stayed steady, never rushing. They didn't need to. I remembered one tracking rule. Animals follow water. So I dropped my gear, cut downhill, and followed the sound of a creek. Hours later, I staggered onto a trail marked with official park blazes. Civilization. At the ranger station, I tried to report everything. The valley, the enclosures, the figures. The ranger frowned. "Sir, that area's closed wilderness. There are no structures there. And your grant? No record. The university says they didn't fund this." My photos were blank. Just empty trees. I quit field work after that. I teach high school biology now in a state with no significant wilderness. But I still see traces. A documentary clip where elk pivot in perfect unison, holding a formation for exactly 7 seconds. A photo of a hawk whose wings bend wrong mid-flight. A wildlife video with XIF data erased. And sometimes my inbox fills with strange offers. Grants from organizations I can't find, always asking for long-term, isolated study in locations that don't appear on maps. I don't answer, but I know the preserve is still there. And I know the rarest specimens it collects aren't animals. They're researchers, observers, people like me. If stories like this make you pause before stepping off the trail, remember, there are more waiting in the ridges. Don't forget to subscribe to Eerie Echoes so you don't wander into the dark alone. If the mountains can preserve wildlife in impossible valleys, then they can just as easily preserve people. Not above ground, but under it. Before we continue, a quick reminder. If you find yourself drawn into these stories, consider subscribing to Eerie Echoes. It helps us keep bringing you the accounts that never make the papers. My name is Harold Lawson, though around the hollers they used to call me Red. I spent 20 years underground in coal country, in seams older than the nation itself. I swore when I retired that I'd never set foot in a mine again. But Appalachia has a way of calling you back, sometimes with voices that don T belong to the living. It started with a phone call from my cousin Earl. He still worked union business, still carried the weight of old disasters on his back. "Red," he said, "kid's been sneaking up around Miller Hollow again. One swears he heard bells ringing underground. Not echoes, not church, shift bells." The Miller Hollow disaster happened in 1963. 31 men buried alive when the roof collapsed. The company sealed the headings instead of digging them out. Cheaper that way. My father was among them, Earl's brother too. For decades, the families held vigils at the gate. Some swore they still heard the men working below. I never believed it. Until last October. We hiked in near dusk, lanterns and flashlights cutting through fog. The portal gate was still welded shut, padlock fused with rust. No one had broken through. But as we stood there, the air pushed cold through the bars, and I heard it. A bell. Not steel on stone, not a chain clanging in the wind, a deep, hollow gong, like the signal we used to call men to shift. One toll every 20 seconds, steady as a heartbeat. Earl and I locked eyes. Neither of us spoke at first. Then he whispered, "That's 3 levels down." And then came the voices. Not shouting, not screaming, just men at work. Picks striking, shovels scraping, muted calls. "Timber here. Powder ready." Work site chatter. The kind of sound you never forget if you've lived underground. "They've been dead 60 years, I said. But my words didn't matter. The mountain was replaying the shift. We checked the ventilation shaft up the ridge. The grate had long since collapsed. Cold air rushed out, carrying not just dust, but the sharp tang of smoke. Burnt powder, like a shot had just gone off. Earl lowered his lantern. Fresh. Then the bell tolled 3 times in quick succession. Any miner knows what that means. Danger signal. Roof fall, explosion, fire. The ground trembled under our boots, and for a moment I swore I heard stone cracking deep below. "Red," Earl said, voice tight. "If we don't look, we'll never forgive ourselves." And before I could argue, he tied rope to an oak and started lowering himself into the shaft. I followed. The tunnel was cramped, timbers rotting, air cold and damp. After 30 feet, it opened into a chamber I remembered from maps, only it should not have been accessible. The collapse had sealed this area decades ago. Yet the tunnel stretched on, timbered rough but passable. The sounds grew sharper, picks, carts, voices humming, dark as a dungeon. At the first intersection, we froze. Ahead in the crosscut, lanterns bobbed, not headlamps. Glass lanterns swaying with invisible hands. "Shift's on!" a voice rasped. I knew that voice, my father's. Shapes moved in the glow. Dozens of men stooped, swinging picks. But they weren't bodies, they were shadows. Black figures etched against the wall, cast by nothing. And yet they worked in rhythm, sweating in silence that carried sound without breath. Earl clutched my arm. "Look close. They ain't casting shadows. They are shadows." The bell tolled again, and every figure turned. In that glow, I saw hollow eyes, coal-dusted faces from my childhood, lips moving in the same workman's cadence. I nearly stepped forward. Earl yanked me back. "They ain't ours anymore." We stumbled backward toward the shaft. The shadows didn't follow, but the sound did. Louder now, picks slamming, timbers cracking. Dust rained from the roof. Somewhere deeper, Stone screamed. We climbed out, gasping, just as the shaft exhaled a wave of hot air. The oak shuddered. The bell clanged 3 times, so hard I felt it in my teeth. Then silence. The sheriff dismissed it as old miners hearing ghosts. He sent a deputy up to check. The man came back pale and quit the force 2 days later. Earl won't talk about it now. I can't stop. Because last month, in the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of a bell in my house. 31 tolls, the same number as the men who died. After the last note faded, I heard my father's coal, rough voice. Timber. Since then, the floorboards creak like roof beams under weight. My lungs ache like I've been breathing dust. And sometimes, when the silence stretches too long, I hear the faint scrape of a pick against stone. If stories like this leave you uneasy, know this. The mountains don't forget their dead. They just keep ringing the bell. Not every trap in the Appalachians hides in the woods or beneath the ground. Some traps wear log walls, glowing windows, and a welcome note in elegant script. My name is Jake Richardson, and 5 years ago, my wife Emily and I thought we'd found the perfect anniversary getaway, a cabin in the Smokies, listed online as Whispering Pines Retreat. The photos showed a dream, an A-frame perched on a ridge, floor-to-ceiling windows, stone fireplace, hot tub overlooking misty valleys. The price was half of anything else. No reviews, no phone number, just an email confirmation. Thank you for choosing Whispering Pines. Enjoy your stay. It felt too good to be true. And it was. The GPS led us deep into the mountains, onto gravel switchbacks with no houses, no signs of life. As the sun dropped, we reached a clearing. There it stood, the cabin from the photos, warm light glowing inside, smoke curling from the chimney. "Looks like somebody already lit the fire," Emily said. But when we stepped in, the place was empty. On the counter lay a note, written in careful looping script. "Welcome to Whispering Pines. Everything you need has been provided." And it had. The fridge was stocked with food we hadn't bought. Closets held clothes in our exact sizes. Even boots by the door fit us perfectly. That first night, I dreamed of voices whispering outside the windows. I woke at 3 a.m. to Emily standing at the glass, pale as the moon. "Do you see them?" she whispered. Out in the trees, lights drifted. Dozens of soft, flickering orbs. Not flashlights, not lanterns. They moved slowly around the cabin, circling, never stepping into clear view. By the time I joined her at the window, the lights had vanished. The next morning, a guest book appeared on the coffee table. Thick, leather-bound, filled with entries dating back decades. The early pages praised the beauty of the cabin, but the later ones grew strange. Dreams every night, hard to wake. Car won't start. Trails always lead back. Don't stay past checkout. Don't let it keep you. The most recent entry, dated just 2 weeks earlier, ended mid-sentence. Emily wanted to leave. I told her we'd paid for 3 nights, that everything was fine. But even as I spoke, my voice sounded wrong to my own ears. Flat, detached. She searched the cabin for car keys and ended up in the basement. I'll never forget her scream. On the wall were photographs. Dozens of couples smiling in front of the same cabin. Some in black and white, some Polaroids, some recent color prints. At the bottom hung a photo of us. Emily in a flannel she didn't own, my arm around her. Both of us smiling on the deck. Beneath it, in that same looping script, the Richardsons, October 2024. They decided to stay forever. That night, the voices returned. Louder. Not whispers now, but invitations. "Come outside. Dinner is ready. We've been waiting for you." I found myself at the door, hand on the knob, ready to step out. Emily grabbed me, shouting that the cabin was erasing me, hollowing me out. I wanted to argue, but the truth is, she was right. I could feel my thoughts dissolving, replaced by a strange calm. She tore pages from the guest book, every entry with our names, our photo, and threw them into the fireplace. As the paper burned, the cabin shuddered. Windows rattled. The lights outside turned red, angry, flickering like flames. But the car started. Somehow, the spell broke long enough for us to run. We drove the gravel road too fast, never looking back until the glow of the cabin disappeared into fog. When we got home, the listing was gone. The charge disappeared from our card. Whispering Pines had erased its tracks. But sometimes at night, I feel the tug again. A soft voice in the dark. You've already checked in. Why not come home? We moved twice, but the feeling follows. The mountains remember their guests. You've been listening to Eerie Echoes. If stories like these make you think twice before booking that mountain cabin or stepping onto that unmarked trail, consider subscribing. It helps us keep uncovering the places where the maps end and the mountains begin their work. Because here in Appalachia, not every guest gets to leave.